to the Construction Big Breakfast, where we give you a hearty serving of insider tips and business strategies to help fuel your day so you can thrive in the construction industry. Now, here's your host, Tip-Top Tim Fitch.
Hi, and welcome to the latest episode of the Construction Big Breakfast with me, your host, Tip-Top Tim Fitch. And this week, we're joined by our very best guest star, Steve Fox. Hi, Steve.
Morning, Tim. How are you?
I'm very well. Good to see you. Now, regular viewers of this podcast know exactly what the first question is going to be, so I won't disappoint. Steve, what did you have for breakfast this morning?
Well, we have a double shift for breakfast, so we have a banana and coffee in bed before I take the dogs out at about 6-7 o'clock. And then my breakfast doll these days have the same thing. So a bit of homemade granola, some fruit and some yogurt on it, and some plenty of coffee to get me going with some fruit juice.
Yeah, very healthy. Very healthy. And it's interesting you do a double shift on the breakfast, just to kill the hunger pangs first thing. I had today, because various reasons, I had just toast with Marmite, but I've got into this Turkish yogurt drink, kefir, and I had a glass of that, which is very good for your stomach. So even I, am afraid, didn't have a fry up this morning.
You must have abused your stomach last night, Tim.
Well, it's a long-term, lockdown management of my insides. Anyway, enough of that. So, Steve, you're very welcome here. Perhaps just to get going, for those, I'm sure there may only be one or two of our viewers who aren't aware of you, but just give us a little brief what you were doing a year or two ago and what you're up to at the moment.
Right. Yeah. So people say it's retired, although it's not doing nothing. So I'm doing a bit less work. So I've worked for 37 years in contracting, civil engineering contracting, 30 of which with Edmund Nuttall and Bam Nuttall, as everyone knows, since we changed the name in 2008. The last 10 years of which was as chief exec. So I stepped down last summer after just over 10 years in charge, with a view to doing a bit less. Part of the deal with Mrs. Fox was to spend a bit more time together and to have a bit of a lifestyle change. So we've done that. We've moved house, we've relocated, and I'm just trying to find some things that interest me to fill the equivalent of 2 to 3 days a week. So bit of a mixed bag since then, but it's been great. And I have to say, I haven't missed the full-time job for 1 second. I missed the people a little bit.
Well, that's great. And I mean, of course, as someone who transitioned over to consulting, in fact, it's 10 years ago now. We've been going 10 years just about. It's a different world. So I wish you luck in it, and you should. I hope you should enjoy it, because it's a different. It's obviously very, very different from there.
That's great. It's interesting being able to. I suppose the big change is, you go from when you run a business where you do the things around the business. My whole year was mapped out, for me in terms of the schedules of all the meetings, doing the reviews and meetings with the parent company and all the management, everything. We used to plan the whole year, or probably 18 months in advance, rolling ahead. And suddenly now, I'm deciding what I'm doing. So. It's nice to go and have a chance to go and do things that you do because they interest you. Interesting, you mentioned the C word. So I have gone over to the dark side. I had to set a little business up. So I'm doing little bits of construction advisory work under the consultants banner, reviews and things, and a bit for some government bodies, and also helping a few little startups. So it's really nice because you start to do things for people who want you to help them and appreciate it. So it's great. And I'm also, I've kept in touch with a few things because I took on a non-exec post, medium-sized contractor at Barhale. I think that's in the public domain, so people probably know that. A little business I've known for a long time. I like Dennis and Andy, so it's been nice. And again, been nice to be welcomed and wanted. And I've retained my roles as well with WISE. That's the WISE campaign, Women's in Science, Engineering, Technology. Well, I'm a non-exec there. I'm going to stay with that for a little bit longer yet, and I'm also going to see out my term as a non-executive trustee of the Construction Industry Training Board, CITB. So all things I got involved with are obviously pro bono things that just they interest me. I think they're important parts of our industry. So people have to put a little bit of effort into helping these things. It's a bit of a mixed bag. So it seems to fill my 2 to 3 days a week. Although always open to offers, Tim.
Well, we'll bear you in mind, Steve. Don't worry. I mean, it's very interesting listening to you, because obviously, although I didn't rise to your heady heights before I left contracting, it is very different when you're helping other businesses to move forward, solve problems which seem insurmountable, and apply what you've learned in large corporations to startups or much smaller businesses. There was a lot of give over.
I think the knack to learn, isn't it? What I'm learning in it is that I remember we used to have umpteen consultants, particularly influencing the parent company. Consultants come and look at things around the business, and they always felt like consultants doing a brief because they're going, and you thought, do you really engage with them? Because I don't really want these people in here around me. And the difference is finding bits of consultancy where you can go to people who actually want the help. And that's what's really nice, is finding people who actually say, it'd be really nice if you come and give a bit of help. And actually what you find there, it tends to be short bursts of things. You go and help people for the odd day here and there, because you don't want to go and sit around a business for months on end and write huge reports. That's a different thing. But this, being able to just go in and help people on an ad hoc basis, and you get proper quality time with them, and then they're listening to you and they're interested in the things, the observations you can make around their business, and it's finding those opportunities. And it's actually great because you go back at the end and think they really appreciated what you did for them, and that's the win-win you need to get out of it. I think that's, for me, what I'm trying to find. No,
I mean, I know exactly where you're coming from, and I mean, that's great that you've had some early success. And of course, you and I go back. In fact, we go back longer than you can remember. But I won't bore the listeners with the stories. But we over the years, our paths crossed many times, and I know that you've got some really interesting observations on the construction and the particularly contracting sector. Obviously, gained from your 30+ years as a leader in that part of the industry. You may not have seen it, but we did a piece of work in conjunction with UCL. We ran some workshops and what have you, tagging last year, called Castles in the Air, which was really looking back in time at the contracting industry in the UK and how it had developed since post-war, since 1948. To where it is more or less now. Now, you know, and I know that it's a marginal business now, isn't it?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. I do know a bit about it, actually, because I took part in some of that work with Headley Smith.
That's right.
Yeah, smashing guy as well. Yeah, and a great artist. You've seen his work.
Yeah, he's just retired to become a full-time artist.
Yeah, fabulous. Great stuff. Sent me some of his pictures. I'm really interested. Yeah, so, no, I know about that. I remember talking at length about that, and yes, the lack of progress in our industry. We like doing what we did, don't we?
I characterise it, it's still, the way I sort of think about it now, it's still run by highly educated people. And this isn't supposed to be casting aspersions on what I'm about to say on the particular blue collar profession, but the industry's thought is, although we've got highly educated, clever people running it, the industry's run as if it was run by carpenters who are worried about getting the next day's delivery of timber to site and putting a gang of men to work.
Oh, that's interesting. I could see why you'd observe that. I think bits of the industry, there are bits of the industry that do still behave like that. I think there's other bits that are more enlightened that would like to do things differently, but they can't, because this is an interesting industry where I think it's one of the very few products where the person that actually who delivers the bulk of the product is the last person you engage with, and yet you want a bespoke product from them, because everybody always reinvents every wheel for some bizarre reason. And what's more is you get an army of experts to actually tell you what it is you want, how you want it, what it's going to look like, what specifications can be built with. when it can be built, how much it's going to cost. This army of experts tell you all this stuff on the meter, taking no risk, before you then go and engage with the person you're going to buy it from. It goes, oh my God, and actually that person just says, okay, yes sir, I just do what you told me, because that's how we set the industry up. So I think some of the leadership would like to do it differently, but it's very, very difficult, because you don't really very often get that opportunity because of how we structure what we buy. I can't think of anything else we buy where we buy it in that way. I mean, could you imagine going down to your local car showroom and saying, oh, I like this car, but actually what I want is I want the engine out of that from that showroom down the road, out of that BMW. I want the stereo system out of that system over there. I want the wheels from that. I want that. And by the way, I only want to pay 30 grand for it. And they go, well, so we can't supply you that. And even if we could, it'd cost you 200. You know, but that's what we do with construction. So,
now, well, I think I've got a sense we're going to be agreeing with each other here, Steve. One of the things my view was that from that castles in the air, one of the key things is that construction has completely let go of the sales process, which I think is akin to what you've outlined.
Yeah.
The sales process is controlled typically by clients' advisors, who, as you say, aren't taking any risk.
Absolutely. And in fact, we've seen in the last, I think it started in like the mid-90s, maybe late 90s, but we've seen this, and there's now an army of people out there called procurement advisors. So in the past, you know, in the old days, whether it was right or wrong, I mean, we only ever pay from here down in those days anyway, because it was always client design with a bill of quantities and an ICE fifth form of contract. So it always looked the same, but at least every competition was the same. Then these procurement advisors came along, and what you see is they advise clients on how to buy things. So we suddenly get this plethora of competitions ending up. And of course, so that's what started. Yes, the clients are absolutely always in charge of how they buy it. But now they have this game about how can we buy it differently to the last one, how differently to everybody else, with this bunch of advisors on the meter telling them how to run this competition. And of course, the subtext to it, of course, as well, is what's underpinning it all, is about and how can they, in their perception, shove risk across the table to go with it. You know, there's this thing going on underneath it about push all the risk to that contractor. They're making loads of money. That's another strange thing, isn't it? This perception that contractors are getting rich. Everyone thinks contractors make loads of money. Well, go and look at the figures. Years into look at that number that go bust. You know, and yet we still have this perception that the builders getting rich off us, isn't they? It's a very strange wiring we have around this whole place. But absolutely, I mean, we are not in control of what we sell at all. We have no control over it whatsoever, because the rules are set by somebody who sets the competition. And it's interesting. I mean, I've had customers say to me in the past, I said, well, you wouldn't, and you know, you have some bids you're not serious about. I said, if I pick up the tender documents, I'm serious. Nobody, it costs far too much to bid a tender to not take it seriously. If I don't want to bid a job, don't pick the documents up. Once you pick it up, I said, and you set the rules. You know, you give us this rule book and we read the rules, and we want to win the competition, so we read the rules exactly to the letter, how do we win the competition? But it's your rule book, you've decided exactly how you're selling it. And I said, the only bit of our market, I think, and I don't know so much about, I'm a little bit cynical when I look at it from the side. The one bit of the market that could sell differently and doesn't seem to want to are the house builders, because they're the nearest, aren't they, to the Apple of this world. I mean, you can walk past the house builder's window and say, oh, I'll pop in and buy a house. Nobody used to walk past my office and say, well, I'm just going to pop into BAM and buy a bridge off them. And, you know, so they're the only bit I think that I feel a little bit, yeah, they could modernise our industry a lot more than they do. They could drive a lot more change, but they don't seem bothered, because largely they're not really contractors, are they? So. But
yeah, you're right. So house building, I mean, we often come across this, people lump it in with construction. I mean, as you well know, it's a different industry, really.
Yeah.
It just happens to do a bit of construction, but it's probably only about a third of the value.
Yeah. It's a thorn in its side, the construction piece, isn't it?
It's the stone in the shoe, isn't it? If it wasn't construction, it would be easier.
Yeah.
I mean, just working on that theme, because this whole issue around the fact that construction isn't in control of the sales process and it reacts to someone else, not even the client's usually instructions. They're coming from their advisors. Of course, has led us to where we are and all of the things that the industry gets knocked for.
Yeah, absolutely.
Safety, lack of or perceived lack of innovation, and so on and so forth.
Absolutely, this is a strange old industry, isn't it? So it's interesting, isn't it? I mean, and we are stuck with our bad habits. So you know, even when we come up with these ruses that are supposed to be, oh, this is different, isn't it? Like this term, design and construct. How many times have you heard that term? And we don't do design and construct. It's quite interesting because actually in the UK, design and construct actually doesn't mean design; it means do the detailing, because we don't get any freedom to design. When we get a design and construct job, it's about, you know, you look at it, you get a jet, you come along, it's going to be, well, you're going to have piles of these sensors, going to be this wall thick, it's going to be this long, and we can do a bit of detailing around the joints. You look at highways, you know, you can say, we can move the alignment, you know, 0.5 metre or something, and 300 mil horizontally. I mean, we don't do design, we do detail and construct. But the other thing is actually, we don't design before we construct. It's really strange. You know, we start building jobs before we finish doing all that. Is it? And we wonder why we get what we get. You know, how many times do you think, oh, we've got the pole loads, we'll start drilling. You know, never mind what's going on top of it. It's bonkers, isn't it? I mean, I've probably heard me say this before, but I said, you know, would you get in an aeroplane built the same way as you build a construction project? Because I bloody wouldn't. It's crazy, isn't it? I just think, you know, why don't we, particularly in this age, you know, with the advent of digital and what we can do, why we don't design everything in its entirety in a digital environment before we even contemplate doing any near a project, anywhere near it? And, you know, you could design it in its entirety. You can walk around it virtually. Everybody can see it. This is what it is. And then you can take a step back and say, right, now we've finalised what we're building. Now you can start to think about the components in it, can't you? You start to think, well, we can think about the components differently. Instead of doing what we currently do, which is we deliver a load of loose components to a project and then try and work out how to put them together, you know, and including mixing sand and stones and cement and water together to pour them into bits of wood. You know, I mean, that's what we do. We were doing that like 200 or 300 years ago and longer. Bricks have been laying for what? Thousands of years. You know, instead of doing that, actually start saying, well, we could think about components differently, and start to make the components differently. So then, of course, you can start to say, well, what can some components and standard components look like? So we can then start to make them in different places. So you can start to make them on some sort of production line. And then, you know, so what's that production line look like? Well, it looks a lot better than it currently does, doesn't it? Because it's a proper environment where it's safe and it's planned, and you can train people, you can give them the right environment to work in, and it's more attractive to work in. You start to attract different people, so they go out to that muddy old wet building site, and you start to turn a construction site into an assembly line. And it's just, you know, it just seems so obvious to start to do these things, and the benefits that come are so immense, but yet we can't get there. I always think, you know, if you look at other industries and the journey they've been on against our industry, I thought about, I mean, you look at, I think automotive's quite interesting, isn't it? You look at an automotive line from just 40 odd years ago. I mean, go and watch Made in Dagenham. That's a great picture, isn't it? You know, you look at that Ford line, and how did they make everything then? And you look at a picture of an automotive assembly line today, and it's almost the only similarity is a car comes off the end of it, you know. And you think, and all the components are moved between suppliers multiple times maybe before they end up on a project, but they're going between fixed places, factories, where everyone knows what they're doing, and then they come onto the assembly line in the right sequence. They get put together, and the car comes over. And what's construction done in that time? Construction still looks like that factory in Dagenham. You know, it hasn't changed. We still got bring all of those components to the assembly line and stick them together. And it's just, you know, we're starting to see some bits here. I know some odd examples of things going on, but our wiring's just not there. And we're really quite anti it, aren't we? It's do you know, it's 9 years ago now. There was a bit of film in 2012, posted from a project in China, I think it was, wasn't it? Where
yes.
They did, what was it, 30 stories in 15 days?
Yeah.
You know, and it's brilliant. This little time, that's what they did. And that's how they went about it, isn't it? And reaction in the West to that project, instead of saying, wow, we're going to do 40 stories in 10 days, the reaction was to say, oh no, the quality's rubbish, this will be wrong, it'll fall down. Well, instead of saying we're going to better it, You know, we just criticised and said, well, let's that's a good idea. Let's do it even better. It's just that bit of film is so old now. So
I mean, well, obviously this is likely to be there's less challenging conversation perhaps because I'm agreeing with you. The industry is where it's at, and I think to move forward, it needs to think about how it might regain some control over the sales process, which I think will take some very creative thought, because you've got to come up with something that's really compelling. Because I'm certain, taking your point about competitive tendering, public procurement, I'm certain this government buys hundreds of thousands of iPhones a year, which are at 40% net margin plus, and are happy to pay it because the product is more secure than the alternatives and it's desirable and all the rest of it.
I think we're getting through to them. I mean, the government construction playbook, I guess people haven't had a chance to wade their way through it. Actually, it's only 80 pages, it's not too bad. But it's another clear step in the right direction. I mean, look, public procurement is a constant excuse or thorn in the side of getting established relationships and buying things differently. And there's no doubt, I mean, if you look back, as much as I've been moaning about how we go about things, there's no doubt, I mean, we do have, and we have had more programs of work and frameworks in recent years. And, you know, everybody works on them, all says it was much better. The problem is we then come along with, oh yeah, but we can't renew it. We've got to go through this competition again. But, you know, there's no doubt all the evidence is that those arrangements have led to better relationships, more collaboration and better solutions, and ultimately probably more cost effective, better products at the end of the day. I mean, there's still other reasons why we haven't modernised a lot of the process, unfortunately, but you do see it, and I think the government is getting that it needs to promote that more. I think the army of advisors, of course, don't get it because it's not in their interest, is it?
No.
I mean, let's face it, the lawyers get paid every time they write a bespoke contract. The procurement experts get paid every time they do a procurement competition. You know, so they're hardly going to be incentivized to say, let's stop doing all this stuff, you know, because actually they're the people that have driven in introducing it. So, and they're the people in control. It's a bit like turkeys and Christmas, isn't it, in that respect? So you see more emerging government advice about we should go down programs of working relationships. I mean, next thing is about they've got to change about all the bloody things they put in the way about what real innovation and what change in industry looks like. But at least if you get better working relationships and better trust, and I've yet to be on a framework, you know, we had quite a lot. I mean, you know, about Nuttall, I mean, I said in my time, you know, 75–80% of our workload was in some sort of repeat work, where, and a lower where people said, you know, they didn't get a benefit from the way those frameworks worked. Both sides go to the customers. Everyone thinks it's better. You know, what happens is, unfortunately, at some point you hit some sort of break point. Somebody starts a competition, and you've done your best to be in a place to win it again, but you know, there's no guarantees, are there? Because at the end of the day, the old procurement people, and then somebody comes in with a cheap fee and doesn't know what it's about the quality. The cheap fee wins the job, and off we all go. And everyone else goes, oh, we so want you to win it, but we've got to go do this, you know. So we've got to get out of that sort of mentality. Of course, that's the other thing that goes on. People have this perception that actually, well, if you're only on a fee, this shouldn't be. You know, fees got to keep going down. It keeps on driving you see people bidding on fees that are less than their overhead cost. So how's that work? You know, at the end of the day, it's all got, money's got to come in somewhere. People think, oh, we're getting it for less. They're not. It's just how you wrap it up and get some other way of getting it. So I think it's inching in the right direction, but there's a lot more to do. But you're right, and the next thing we need to be able to do is to work out how in those environments where we've removed the sales process, because it's not about we're in charge of it, but we've removed it. What we've really got to do then is work out how we remove all the other obstacles and say, right, now we're going to build a completely different product in a completely different way. And I always aspired, I mean, I never worked, actually it's interesting because of course I've done this non-executive Barhale, so I do want to go and have a look and find out more, but I always wanted to go and find out about what happened at Anglian, because Anglian Water always talked a great story, appeared to do something that's light years ahead of anybody else. And in fact, that we never bothered even contemplating bidding you, because we thought, why would you want to change your supply chain? It obviously works so well. What's the point in even bidding in a competition like that? But Dale and Chris Newcomb used to talk, you know, about what they did. I was very envious because they seemed very enlightened, but I don't know if it's as good as they talked it. but it certainly felt light years ahead of anything else being done in terms of driving different solutions, you know. And actually the real thing about saying to somebody, well, here's my problem, whatever it is, and here's how much I can afford to solve it. I've got £2 million to solve this problem. If you can't solve for 2 million, let's not bother solving it. You know, but if you can, what's the best solution for that? And they certainly talked about, they'll give examples, they came up with completely different solutions to the one that they started out with, because, you know, they got an arrangement where everybody was buying into, well, what's the best solution, rather than, you know, what's best for my design fees. So,
yeah. I'll just go back to the point I made. I'd be interested in your reflections. What would it take to regain control of the process without necessarily lobbying government, which appears to be the solution that's being proffered by the industry at the moment?
yeah.
What's your view about, because you've talked about DFMA type things, you know, factory construction of components, or just in time start stuff, as was shown on that famous Chinese video. All of that needs massive investment, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And I'm not really sure in my own mind whether the skills to actually rustle up the money and then deploy it effectively are there.
No, I agree with that. I mean, the investment's not going to come unless you can see the certainty that you are going to win, you are going to be able to sell it, and you're going to make enough money to make the investment worth it. And of course, the expectation for return on investment has gone up so much. You know, of course, we saw. I mean, you know, we talked when I started in the industry. Most contractors had a bit of R&D of their own, because you know what we used to have compared to what we've got today, and people's expectations of whack is just makes it even harder. So I agree with you. Unless you can see a way through it, and it's actually I sat on something the other day where government was talking about what it takes to unlock some things. I said, well, you've got to have certainty. It's no good saying, oh, we've created this environment. If people can't see, people aren't going to invest just on, well, it might work out like this. So it's pretty difficult to see a way through it with the environment created. And of course, it's endlessly chasing the cheap fees and things now. It's going to be locked into that. And with such low barriers to entry, and this perception that, oh, contractors are getting rich, aren't they? I mean, that's another bonkers thing you're doing. So that sort of a high level lack of trust is unhelpful as well. And of course, the truth is that most contractors don't do a lot these days because of outsourced everything. So that's another problem. You've got a group, there are a small number of contractors that still employ people and do real work. Unfortunately, there's an awful lot that don't, and they also colour what's going on out there. So I think, and then you've got the issue with public sector and the perception of, or the reality of the rules. I suppose perception is reality at the end of the day anyway, isn't it? But the rules say we've got to do this, this, and this, or it's not fair. So, which means we keep going through these endless bloody competitions. We don't form things. I mean, the bit that I mentioned this before as well. I think needs to really step up to the mark and lead the change in the industry are the house builders. 25% of the bigger construction industry is house builders. They are definitely potentially in charge of their destiny. They could decide to build units completely differently, sell them. They are the one place where you walk past a shop window and go and buy something, and they seem completely disinterested in it because the contracting piece and it's just a thorn in their side, and they don't really care, do they? And the quality of their product's gone backwards. I mean, I've met a guy the other day who's got a business, goes around his business. He goes around new housing estates at 6 to 9 months old, knocking on the door saying, would you like me to come and fix the snags on your house? Because that's about, he said, the sweet point where people have got fed up with nagging the builder and then they're prepared to just pay somebody else to come and do it. And people get a list of things.
Well, that's a sad indictment. And of course, in terms of house building, what's the benefit to doing house building perfectly? Because yes, there'll be less snags, but it doesn't sound like they're necessarily rectifying them. But by how much could you reduce the cost? Now, because it has a small impact on their return on capital.
Well, I don't think they really care what the house costs, do they? I mean, to be honest, whatever the house costs just goes into the equation, and the price goes up by 20 grand. They don't really care.
It's a third of the sale value. Yeah. It's a third of the sale value, typically.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, look, I know house builders might disagree with me and say I don't know what I'm talking about because I've never built houses, but I just look at it and say they don't care. If the house cost half the price to build, was twice as good, they wouldn't care. because they can sell them. They can sell them at huge amounts they can potentially make, and the money's all in other things.
Steve, I'm going to draw it to a close there because we've had an excellent 25 or so minutes of a sort of a download of your experience and your thoughts, particularly reflecting back on 30 plus years leading construction companies has been really, really great. There's some pearls of wisdom in there. There's some areas for improvement for the industry and maybe some pointers to the future. So I thank you very much for sparing me and the podcast your time this morning. And to those of you who've been watching, thank you very much. Join us next time. There'll be another podcast in a week or two's time. And I hope that you subscribe if you've liked it and push the button which will appear. All of that's supposed to be very good. And see you next time. Bye.
Thanks, Tim. Lovely to see you.
Want to learn more about how Invennt can help your business maximize its bottom line? Head on over to www.invennt.com and get in touch with our team today. Thanks for joining us this week on the Construction Big Breakfast. Make sure to visit our website, www.invennt.com, where you can subscribe to the Construction Big Breakfast on all platforms so you'll never miss a show. While you're at it, if you found value in the show, we'd appreciate a positive rating. Or if you'd simply share it with a friend, that would help us out too. Be sure to tune in for our next episode.